Hi, I'm Bill Sargent, and I'm running for Congress in the 14th Congressional District here in Texas. And this is my weekly broadcast, asking questions or answering questions that you asked me in an attempt to try to make sure that we have a dialogue with each other. So, my treasurer, Philip Triddle, is my moderator for the day. And Philip, what questions do we have?
Well, you want to start?
Yeah, whatever you got.
Okay. Jessica from Brazoria County asked, you are a veteran. What would you do to help our vets, especially those who cannot get an appointment with a primary care physician for weeks on end?
Well, as most of you know, I've worked as in congressional affairs as well as on Capitol Hill. If a person was to call my office as your congressman, and let's say Sergeant Jones called, excuse me, and he can't get in to see a primary care physician with the VA, so he talks to my caseworker. We'll call her Hilda. So Hilda answers the phone, and Sergeant Jones talks to her, says he hasn't been able to get in to see a doctor for 2 or 3 weeks. He's been trying; it has been unsuccessful. So Hilda's going to pick up the phone after taking his information, and she's going to call over to the VA Congressional Affairs Office. And she's going to say, we have Sergeant Jones here who wants to get in to see a primary care physician at the VA hospital, but he's been unable to do so for 2 or 3 weeks. Can you help us out? And they said, sure, we'll put it on our list of things to do. So they go ahead and do that. A week later, Hilda hadn't heard from the VA. So she calls them back and she says, I'm calling you about, from Congressman Sargent's office, I'm calling you about Sergeant Jones here. Where are we on helping him? And they said, well, we're still working on it, but we haven't got anything solved yet. And so what she would be instructed to say at that point would be, okay, well, we'll give you 1 more week. But if we haven't heard back from you by this time next week, the next call is going to be from Congressman Sargent to your boss, the head of Congressional Affairs, asking why you can't get this taken care of. Now, so the next thing that's going to happen is that a week later, it turns out that she hadn't heard back. So I pick up the phone and I call the head of Congressional Affairs at VA and I say, hey, where are we on Sergeant Jones here? My staff's been working with your staff for the last 2 weeks. It's now gone on 3 or 4 or 5 weeks since he's been trying to get a doctor to see a doctor. And this hadn't happened. Can you tell me where we are and why we haven't got a solution yet? And he'd probably say, well, we're still working on it or whatever. Well, at that point, I would say to the head of Congressional Affairs at the VA, fine, I'll tell you what, by close of business Wednesday of next week, if I haven't heard back from you that we've got this problem solved, then I'm going to get in a taxi. I'm going to go over to the VA headquarters, and I'm going to knock on the administrator's door and say, why is it you guys can't solve this problem? Now, I can tell you in the first part of this thing, when the boss for the Congressional Affairs gets a phone call from a member of Congress, having been on that side of on the Congressional Affairs side of the fence, I can tell you that's not something that they want to have happen. But even worse, they do not want a congressman coming down to their offices and finding out what is going on. Why can't you solve this problem for us? Now, so typically what will happen is when you say that to a Congressional Affairs office, they're going to solve the problem. They're going to put a lot of pressure on to get the problem solved. But let's say it goes that far, and I have to go down to the VA to talk to the administrator and say, why can't you solve this? Well, once I do that, I only have to do it once, because the next time Hilda calls the VA for another service member, what's going to happen? They're going to remember that Mr. Sargent came down and talked to the administrator about what the problem is, why he can't get a solution here. And they're going to remember that. So I can't do that for 500,000 people, but I can do it for 1 or 2. And after that, I won't have to do it again, because at that point, they'll know I mean business. These people have put their lives on the line for you and me to have the freedoms we have. And they deserve better treatment than what they're getting. Is there any other questions?
Ashley from Jackson County asks, what do you think about President Trump and his border wall?
Well, let me separate that into two questions. What do I think about President Trump? Excuse me, I have a cold. I'm trying to get over it, so please excuse me if I'm coughing a bit. Um, President Trump, what I really like about President Trump is that he's keeping his word. I like the judicial nominees he's proposed, and especially on the Supreme Court. I love Gorsuch. Um, and Philip, did you say this person was from Jefferson County?
Yes.
Okay, one of the people who is on, I understand, is on the list for appointees from Jefferson County is Michael Trincali, a guy who I ran against for Congress in 2012. Michael is a really good guy and a really good attorney, and he will make an excellent judge. So if that's the kind of caliber of people that the president is appointing to lower positions in the judiciary as well as the Supreme Court, he's doing a great job. The economy is doing well. We, excuse me again, and you know he's like with the regulations. We're seeing regulations being decreased, all the time, and especially as it relates to small and medium sized companies. They spend a lot of time trying to live within the rules that are put on them by the people who are in the bureaucracy, the regulatory agencies, and we need to make it lessen that load on them. If there's something that we really need to do, okay, do it. But unless it's really necessary for public safety or whatever, then try to get rid of it. And that's what Trump has been doing. Now let's take a look at the wall. I think I talked about this last week when we met. I think in some places the wall makes sense. If you talk about California, for example, excuse me again, California, or you talk about Arizona, in places where it's not hilly or whatever, that might make sense. But you try to do it for Big Bend. How are you going to put a wall in Big Bend and have it work? I think Big Bend, for example, in places like that, it makes more sense to have electronic surveillance. And I think I said this last time. One of the things that's really important is that the Border Patrol get real-time information. They need to get the information now, not 8, 9, 10 hours later when it's too late to do anything with it. So the wall makes sense in some places, not in every place. Next.
Let's see. Ruben from Galveston County says, I read a letter to the editor by a Mr. Edwards commenting about you and your opponent. In it, he calls you a lifetime bureaucrat, and he praises the work of the current congressman regarding the red snapper issue. Would you care to comment?
Well, first of all, let me just say I find it very interesting that Mr. Edwards, who is on the state Republican Executive Committee, would take sides in a contested primary. I got a call from the chairman of the Texas Republican Party after I filed, and he said, is there anything we can do to help you? We'll try to do that. I can't take sides because of my position, but if we can help you in some way, we'll be glad to do that. That's the correct way to be. I mean, Yvonne Dewey or Carl Gustafson or Garrett Peel, all party chairs should not be taking positions for or against any particular candidate in a contested primary, nor should a person on the executive committee. So I find it interesting that in Mr. Edwards' position on the executive committee, that he would take a position for a particular candidate. Now, what was the second part? We had to do with being a bureaucrat. Is that correct?
Yeah, he calls you a lifetime bureaucrat, and he praises the work of the current congressman regarding the red snapper issue.
Okay. Well, let's talk about being a bureaucrat. I assume that was meant as a way of trying to cut me down a bit, because I have a lot of time working for the federal government. But to me, being a bureaucrat or not being a bureaucrat is really more about a person's attitude and how they take on their job. For example, and I'm sure Mr. Edwards was not aware of this, most people aren't, but for several years I ran a call center for the U.S. Department of Commerce, the Bureau of Industry and Security, which controls exports for national security, foreign policy, short supply reasons. And it's a very, very complicated set of regulations that businessmen often had trouble trying to figure out what it was that they could do and couldn't do. Now, if you're a bureaucrat, your attitude toward the exporter would be, no, you can't do that unless you can prove that it's okay. My approach, and for the approach of the people who work for me, and I told them how to do this, I said, the bottom line is this. I want you to make it work for that exporter. We're in the business of trying to help people export. To the extent they can do so legally, I want you to help them to do that. So if they can't do it one way, can they go a different route? Can they get a different kind of a license? There's some way we can help them to make this deal work, because we want to expand U.S. exports. We want to make sure that they're done correctly. We want to make sure they're done within the law and within the regulations. But the attitude should not be, no, 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 you can't do this. But instead, let's see what we can do to work together to find a solution that'll make it work for you. And that was the approach we used. Now, so when you call somebody a bureaucrat just because they work for the federal government, I think you need to look more into the issue of how did they approach their work? Were they service-minded? Were they trying to help the client, as opposed to saying, no, 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 you can't do anything? Excuse me, I'm sorry I was this cold. Please forgive me. Now, relating to the red snapper issue. Let me go back a few years. My opponent met with 25, 30 fishermen at one point several years ago. And these are recreational fishermen. And he told them he was going to try to help them, do everything he could to try to make things work for them. Then shortly thereafter, an amendment came up on the floor of the House that was going to help the recreational fishermen. And he stood up and he not only voted against that amendment, which was a breaking of trust with the recreational fishermen, but he also spoke in favor of people not voting, or spoke in opposition to it, and encouraged his colleagues not to vote for it. That's saying one thing and doing another. And so he really hasn't been a friend of the recreational fishermen until lately, when all of a sudden he realized he had a candidate who was a friend of the fishermen running against him. And at that point, he starts doing, I guess you could call it backpedaling. Now, it's true, from what I understand, from the records I've seen, that he's been paid something like around $30,000 in donations from the commercial fishermen. So I understand why perhaps he's kind of beholden to them. But let's talk about what he has done. He introduced, the Go Fish Act, and I think that was in the letter to the editor. The Go Fish Act he introduced. Now that was going to increase fishing for recreational fishermen by 62 days and move the date of the fishing. The problem was that, and I don't know his motivation, but I mean, it's very clear to me that bill was going nowhere. Congressmen sometimes, this is what I've seen in the past when I worked on the Hill, congressmen will introduce a bill for two reasons. Sometimes they're doing it for constituent use. They know it's not going to go anywhere. There are not going to be any hearings held on it. No one's going to mark up the bill. It's not going to go to the floor of the House. It's not going to pass the House. It's not going to go to the Senate. It's simply so they can say that he did something for their constituents. That's what that bill falls into, because there was no chance that bill was going to go anywhere. But he can say, I did something. Okay. The other kind of bill that a congressman puts in is when he actually wants to get something accomplished, he goes ahead and tries to work it and make it happen. And that's not what the case in the Go Fish Act. The other thing is that if you've seen my opponent's brochures, he claims responsibility for extending the red snapper fishing season for last year. As those of you who are fishermen know, it was a 3-day fishing season that the federal government gave them, and it was extended to 39 days in exchange for giving up 52 days in state waters. He claims he did this. Well, the bottom line is that was really the initiative of Garrett Graves from Louisiana. I've got friends on the Hill, and the people on the Hill are telling me that all he did is put his name on it. So again, it's like backpedaling in a way. Yeah, he put his name on it. That's important. That's a good thing to do. But when you put your name on something, I believe you ought to be somebody who goes after it, who actually takes action as opposed to just simply putting your name on something. And that's what I see happening here. We need to be honest. We need to have integrity. We need to say that if we did something, we can tell people we did something. But don't take credit for something you didn't do. And so when Mr. Edwards wrote this letter to the editor, calling me a bureaucrat, saying what a great thing that Mr. Weber had done for the recreational fishermen, he left out a lot of the things that were actually true that would have made it a more fair representation. So consider the source and do your homework and realize that when a person says something, it may or may not be true. And so you should do your homework and make sure that what is being said is actually the truth and not fake news. Is there anything else?
Question from Wayne in Friendswood. What are your thoughts on President Donald Trump's lack of ethical behavior in general, and specifically if Mueller's investigation leads to indictments against him and his subordinates of illegal activities?
Well, from what I can tell, and again, I'm not privy to any information more than you are in the news. His name's Wayne again?
Yeah, Wayne.
Yeah, Wayne. I put it this way. From what I can tell, so far, there's been no evidence that there's been collusion or unethical behavior or whatever. If that's the case, then we ought to let the chips fall where they may. Do I like a lot of things that Mr. Trump does with his Twitter account? The answer is no. But he has the right of free speech as any of us do. As I said earlier in this broadcast, what I do like about him is that he's keeping his word, and that's really important. We need to be able to trust the word of what our politicians tell us. If you can't trust the word of what they tell you, then you can't trust anything they're going to do. So whether he's done something that's wrong, I haven't seen any evidence of that. Is a Mueller investigation something that's going to uncover something? Who knows? I have no idea. I'm not involved in those circles. But from what I'm hearing in the news, it's becoming very more evident that perhaps the Obama administration and Mrs. Clinton in particular and her people did a lot of things that were really questionable. So I think what's good for the goose is good for the gander, and so we need to deal with across the board. Is it just Trump we're after, or are we after anybody who did a violation of something like getting rid of emails or keeping emails on a private server that was not protected, or whatever? We need to deal with all of that and not just pick and choose who we're going to go after. I hope that answers your question. Next.
John in Jefferson County writes, my wife and I sent you a postcard asking you to support efforts to protect unborn children. What are you willing to do about this? Well,
I'm definitely pro-life, and I suspect that there's been rumor that we're going to have more people who are on the Supreme Court who will be either resigning or leaving office. As we get more people who are conservative and constitutionalists on the court, I think we may see a changing in the court's position on abortion. From my perspective, life begins at conception. Now, if somebody asks me, are you in favor of saving the child if it means the life of the mother? No, and I'm not going to put myself in the position of God. God makes that decision. I don't, and it's not for me to make that decision. And I understand that, but the life of a child, even as what people will call a fetus or whatever you want to call the child, it's still a life, and it can't protect itself. It doesn't have anybody out there protected except us, the people who are in this country. I don't think God is happy with the millions of children that we've killed over the course of since Roe v. Wade went into effect. That's a real issue for me. I'm very much pro-life. I will not vote for funds for Planned Parenthood, nor will I vote for funds to help abortions overseas. or any of that kind of thing. It's to me, it's a matter of faith. I believe in the Lord Jesus Christ. I'm going to do what He tells me to do, and the bottom line is He is not happy with that. I don't think, and neither am I. But John, thank you for that postcard, by the way. I appreciate it.
Michael in Brazoria asked, and this is a follow-up on the last question. What is your take on the memos becoming public about the FBI and intelligence agencies and potential political bias creeping into their work?
Well, when I worked for, let's go back. When I worked for the county clerk of Galveston County, I'm a Republican. I'm a conservative Republican. I wrote for the newspaper for 4 years as one of the Three Musketeers, and I had political positions and had views and whatever. But when I walked in the door of that office, all that stayed outside. I was not involved at all with politics once we got in the office. In the office, everybody got a fair shot. Everybody got the same treatment, and it was good treatment. In fact, I can tell you that, excuse me, that both the Democratic and Republican Party chairs trusted me. Why? Because they knew I wasn't going to play games with them. So that kind of an attitude is the way we need to have our law enforcement community operate. You may have your own personal opinions, but you keep those opinions to yourself, and you don't let it sway how you view things. As far as law enforcement is concerned, it's a matter of there are laws that have to be enforced. You're going to enforce them. You're going to do investigations in a way that makes sense, that is above board. And if you don't do that, then at that point, you're bringing down the whole agency. One bad apple can have that kind of an effect. So what we want to do here is to make sure that anybody who is playing those kind of games for political reason or whatever, those people need to be held accountable, fired, gotten rid of, sanctioned in some way, or whatever we need to do. But we need to make sure that everybody in those agencies, the intelligence community as well as the FBI, the Department of Justice, understand that when you get into your office and you're doing your job, you do it right, you do it honestly and with integrity. And if you don't do that, you're not going to be there any longer. And that's the way we should treat it. Now, what's happened, every day there's a new story. And who knows what's true and what isn't true. But my hope is that out of this will come a better Justice Department, a better FBI. I mean, the guys who I worked with when I was in the Commerce Department, who were FBI folks, they were class act. They didn't play games. They were about getting the job done, which is what I'm for. So that's where I'm coming from. You have to have integrity and honesty. Do your job right. Leave the politics outside the front door.
Barbara in Galveston asked this question.
Excuse me.
What do you see as the most important things that are needed in a congressman?
Oh, well, I think I just touched on part of that, integrity and honesty. You need to know that when your member of Congress is talking to you, that he's telling you the truth as he knows it. And he may not have all the information, but when the information he does have, he needs to be honest with you. As I told you before, I ran the election process here in Galveston for 6 years. Excuse me. In November 2012, all of our polling places opened 2-3 hours late. That's because I didn't know the right question to ask. And I took ownership of that. The bottom line is if you mess up, take ownership of it and admit that you blew it, learn from it, and go on. So that's what being honest and having integrity is about. It's about not being perfect, because everyone's going to make mistakes one time or another. But the bottom line is when you make a mistake, admit it, and then go on from there and learn from it. So being honest is the first part of it. Also, I'm not into photo ops. I don't I don't go down to the post office to go ahead and to mow the lawn and call the press and tell them I'm going to go do it, and then again show up and find out that, by golly, somebody's already done it ahead of me. That's drawing attention to oneself as opposed to being service related. I mean, if you're gonna go mow the lawn at the local post office, go mow it. don't tell anybody about it. Just go do it. So you know, I mean, so you, as a person, as a congressman, it shouldn't be about you. It should be about the people who you're serving, and that's really what's important. So I'd say, you know, honesty, integrity, service, a heart to get things done, an advocate. A person who's determined to do that. And I mean, I'm a workaholic. I'll admit it. Okay. I mean, when Dwight Sullivan, the county clerk for Galveston County, told me to take some time to get some rest and relaxation, I came home and guess what I was doing? I was on my computer working for stuff for the county because that's just who I am. You know, I'm about doing things and getting things done. Once they're off the list, then fine, we move on. But you know, you need somebody who is tireless, who will get the job done, and who can work and relate to people in doing that. And that's what I'm about. That's what I think every congressman should be about. Anything else?
There
Excuse me.
appears to be no more questions, but I have one for you.
Yeah.
I've heard you talk about career politicians. How would you define a career politician?
Well, I did that on a Facebook post, and I got a lot of flack for it. Let me put it to you this way. A career politician is a person who is more concerned. I mean, there are a lot of different definitions here, but a person who's more concerned about keeping his job and being a congressman than he is about service. You know, I mean, I touched on part of this, making claims that go beyond what are really true, or having photo ops about, you know, I did this. I took a helicopter ride down the coast to see where the coastal barrier system is going to be built. Well, that doesn't really help to get the coastal barrier system built, does it? That's about me as a congressman doing that. It's about Facebook posts about what great things I've done or where I've gone and those kind of things. So if the motivation is about the person as opposed to the service the person is providing, if the motivation is I want to keep my job, then that's, you know, that kind of follows what I would say is a career politician. I can tell you in my case, if I'm elected and I'm only a one-term congressman, okay, fine. I'll work as hard as I can for the time I'm given. I'm self-limiting myself to 3 terms. I will not serve more than 3 terms. Although I jokingly tell people on the campaign trail, if they ask me to be Speaker of the House, I might consider a 4th. But that's probably not going to happen. And so let's be real. I mean, the bottom line is I'll serve 6 years, max. And you know, I mean, if I can't get it done in that period of time, then let somebody else try. But I think I can get a lot done in that period of time. And it's about getting the job done. That's what it's about. You said there are no other questions, Philip? Okay.
No.
Then let me give you one program note. Usually we do this on Monday nights. That's what we started doing. Now we're on Tuesday. Next Monday I have a meeting I have to go to. So we're going to do it again next Tuesday night instead of Monday night. We encourage you to send in your questions. We'll try to answer them, and hopefully you'll enjoy this as much as I do. Have a great day. God bless you, and God bless our country. Amen.